Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode, and I have 3 questions I want to dive into. And so, yeah, let's dive into those. First question I have for today is, are there any side effects to women taking creatine? I love this because, again, this is a supplement that, it's a supplement that I feel like has a lot of it's a lot better now. People are understanding the benefits of creatine, but I think particularly for women, it's one that, again, the myths that are around creatine are exaggerated for women, and then women think that they don't necessarily need creatine. I think it's super beneficial there. Are there any side effects? And no, there's not. And honestly, most women would benefit greatly from taking creatine in general. There's a paper I want to bring up here. It's Creatine Supplementation of Women's Health, a Lifespan Perspective by Smith Ryan et al. Posted back in 2021. And I'm just going to read you the abstract here so you get an understanding of what they found with this. Despite extensive research on creatine, evidence for use among females is understudied, which I think is pretty typical of any exercise supplement. It's usually lacking in female population in general. But creatine characteristics vary between males and females, with females exhibiting 70 to 80% lower endogenous creatine stores compared to males. Understanding creatine metabolism pre and post menopause yields important implications for creatine supplementation for performance and health among females. Due to the hormone-related changes to creatine kinetics and phosphocreatine resynthesis, supplementation may be particularly important during menses, pregnancy, during, and post-menopause. Creatine supplementation among premenopausal females appears to be effective for improving strength and performance and exercise performance. Postmenopausal females may also experience benefits in skeletal muscle size and function when consuming high doses of creatine, and favorable effects on bone when combined with resistance training, right? Again, I think in general, you could just benefit from taking creatine by itself, but also in terms of also combining it with resistance training, you're also going to get those effects on bone, which is super important in that postmenopausal female. Preclinical and clinical evidence indicates positive effects from creatine supplementation on mood, possibly by restoring brain energy levels and homeostasis. Again, we're finding out more and more information around creatine and brain health. So you could also see some positive effects there as well too. Creatine supplementation may be even more effective for females by supporting a pro-energetic environment in the brain. And yeah, that's the abstract there. So yeah, and they conclude here, as a result of changes in creatine homeostasis across the life cycle, particularly as it relates to estrogen, creatine supplementation appears to provide many potential benefits for females. If anything, I almost think women would benefit more from taking creatine. Yeah, so we definitely want to make sure we throw this into our supplement. This is one of the foundational supplements I have for clients is creatine. And again, whether you're male or female, like we're going to make sure we take it. And obviously, again, we want to combine this with resistance training. This is going to help with body composition and bone mineral density. It says particularly in postmenopausal females. I actually have a client. She's fairly new. She is in that kind of menopausal area or period of time. And her weight hasn't changed a ton, but we started taking creatine. We added it in and her lean mass is up and body fat percentage is down. And so that's a win right there. And she saw me post this and she responded, I've been taking it. I haven't really noticed its effects. And I feel like with creatine, it's not going to be something that you're going to notice, you're going to have a noticeable difference in terms of how you feel, right? It's sneaky in a way where here in this scenario, she added lean body mass and she says she doesn't really feel any different. So I think that's completely normal. It's not a supplement that you're going to necessarily feel or notice off the bat. Again, it's like goes under the radar there. Now, from a mood and cognition standpoint, maybe you would be able to notice that, but this is where we need to get into the dosages of it in terms of what this looks like. So when we're looking at like body comp, strength, muscle, again, body comp, more we're looking at around 5 grams per day, right? Whereas if we're trying to get more brain health aspects of it, we're looking at closer to 15 to 20 grams a day. Sorry, that was for the saturation. Basically for brain, you're going to probably go closer to 10 grams essentially. Now, what I will say as a potential side effect, you'd have 2, especially if you start to increase the amount that you have. One is from a gut health perspective. You may find that it can mess with that at these higher dosages, right? So finding the right amount for you is going to be important. And then the water retention, like you may find that your scale weight comes up. But again, this isn't like water weight and it's going to make you like puffy and whatnot. It's more so it's going to draw water into your muscles. So you're going to have that, like your muscles are going to have a fuller look. So it's not a negative thing. But those to me would be the 2 main cons, and those can be avoided. So one can be avoided by how much you take. Second, The water weight one, that's just a mental thing that you need to get through. And again, we want to look at this is where we want to look at body composition versus weight there with that. Those would really be the only downsides there. I guess the other kind of things that we would want to go over creatine, if you're interested in this, would be timing. You can really take it at any time of the day. From my understanding in the research, there is like a potential small benefit of taking it post-workout, but at the end of the day, I would much rather you take it regularly because this is a supplement that you do need to take regularly because like I said, you're not going to just take it once and then have these effects right away. So for example, caffeine, you're going to take caffeine, you're going to see an increase in energy. You take creatine once for 5 grams, you're probably not going to see any benefit. You need to take it regularly and you need to take it for months on end to really see the benefits of it there. So again, we want to make sure that when we take it, we just take it consistently. Second, another like common thing that's going to pop up with creatine, you're going to go to the store and you're going to look online and there's going to be different forms of creatine. In the research, monohydrate has been the one that has shown the greatest promise study after study, and it's the cheapest as well too, right? So you don't need to spend more money on anything, at least at this time, right? And based on the evidence we have now, you don't need to spend any more money on creatine or different forms of creatine. You just need to get monohydrate. And they're coming out now that creatine is becoming more and more popular. They're coming out with gummies. So there's easier ways to get in creatine now at this point. I think the gummies are going to end up being more expensive. So if that cost of doing that is worth it to you, then you can certainly do that. People that I think would really benefit from it. So again, like we just talked about, women in general, I think would really benefit from taking creatine. But then on top of it, we're looking at people who don't consume a lot of animal sources of protein, right? So again, if you're a little bit more plant-based, you would really benefit from taking creatine. And again, there are going to be some people that they aren't as great of a responder to creatine as others because it's not necessarily the most expensive product out there. It's basically going to help. There's a ton of potential benefits of it. It is a no-brainer supplement at this point. It can also be helpful from a recovery standpoint as well too. And they're also showing in terms of potentially even concussions. Again, to me, it's a no-brainer supplement at this point, and that's why it's in my foundational supplements for all the reasons we talked about there. But again, just remember, with all this research on it and all the benefits of it, like at the end of the day, it is still going to have a small effect on results, right? It's not like you're going to take this and it's going to be like, boom, you're just all of a sudden going to change your body composition. Like at the end of the day, you still have to put in the work. You still need to make sure your resistance training's there. You need to make sure you're getting in enough protein. You need to make sure sleep is there. All these other, like the big rocks are going to still be the things that really move the needle. And this is just going to be a small thing that can potentially boost results, especially if you're in this demographic or the demographics that I mentioned today as well too. Let me know if you have any questions on creatine, but again, to me, it's a no-brainer. And even for, as this paper is suggesting for women, it's definitely something you want to consider there. I guess a couple other things I want to hit on. They go through different, like so for example, like even during pregnancy, increased metabolic demand from growth and development during gestation, particularly from the placenta, has been associated with a reduced creatine pool. Recent human data suggests a dramatic alteration in creatine homeostasis during pregnancy, and a reduction in creatine stores during pregnancy have been linked with low birth weight and preterm birth weight. So again, to date, there's growing evidence in animal models, so we need to understand animal here, that creatine supplementation during pregnancy enhances, augments neuronal cell uptake of creatine and supports mitochondrial integrity in animal offspring, thereby reducing brain injury induced by intrapartum asphyxia. So there are no human studies to date that have evaluated the effect of creatine supplementation during pregnancy, but it could provide a safe, low-cost nutritional strategy for reducing intra and postpartum complications associated with cellular energy depletion. Further details for the mechanisms, and really it's a low, as I mentioned here, a safe, low-cost nutritional strategy to add in during pregnancy, right? What I feel like in general with creatine. And then we have creatine considerations for postmenopausal women, right? The menopausal-related decrease in estrogen is a main contributing factor to the age-related loss in muscle and bone mass and strength, while the mechanisms explaining the link between estrogen levels, muscle mass, and strength remain to be determined. There is evidence to suggest that insufficient estrogen levels are associated with increased inflammation and oxidative stress and may contribute to the blunted muscle protein synthetic and satellite cell response to anabolic stimuli. So creatine supplementation has been shown to act as a possible countermeasure to the menopausal related decrease in muscle, bone, and strength by reducing inflammation, oxidative stress, and serum markers of bone resorption, while also resulting in a concomitant increase in osteoblast cell activity, aka bone formation. Muscle integrity has also been upregulated with creatine use, resulting in an increase in satellite cell activity, growth factors like IGF-1, protein kinases downstream in mammalian target of rapamycin pathway, which is mTOR. And then these effects have been recently been explored in females, often combined with resistance training. As a result of the unique cyclical and long-term changes in estrogen across the lifespan, creatine supplementation poses an interesting therapeutic strategy for postmenopausal females. else. So again, obviously we want to make sure that we weight train, everything like that. But again, there's in those two specific demographics, you could see a lot of benefit there. And then lastly, the last thing I want to say on creatine, I know I've said this multiple times already. One of the other cool things that is now coming out around creatine too is under times of sleep deprivation, creatine can help maintain cognition during that time, right? Like you won't see as big of a decrement in cognition during that period of time. It can help you with sleep deprivation. Now, this doesn't mean, hey, just don't get good sleep and hey, you just take creatine and things are going to be great. What this means is during periods of time when you know sleep is not going to be great, i.e., if we can go back to somebody during pregnancy, what's that period of time afterwards going to look like? You're going to be waking up multiple times per night, right? I just went through this and I made sure I took creatine and it was super helpful. Again, I felt overall pretty good, but I don't know for sure, obviously, if it did a ton, but I made sure I took it because of the research out there saying that it can help with that, especially under time. It can help with cognition under times of sleep deprivation or less sleep than normal. Again, something to potentially look at there. So again, long story short, take creatine monohydrate is the way to go there with that. All right. So next question is around, we need to lift during fat loss dieting. Do we keep the same weight or try to still progressively overload? And I think this is a good topic in general. I think I'll go over what training should look like, but I also want to go over why training for fat loss shouldn't really be a thing that we do. So our training shouldn't really drastically change. And what I mean by that is we shouldn't really alter our methods of training, right? So hey, when we're not fat loss dieting, what are we trying to do with training? You're probably trying to build muscle so what are we going to do with that? We're going to weight train. We're going to progressively overload. I'm still going to have you do a little bit of cardio. We're going to make sure we eat enough protein. And then obviously the big thing that's going to change is going to be our nutrition, right? We're going to make sure that we're eating enough. We're making sure that our body weight's staying the same or trending up over time there. So that's the main thing that we're looking at when we're not in a fat loss phase. So now we go to a fat loss phase. Do we really change anything? And the answer is no. Like we really shouldn't change how we go about training. Now you don't all of a sudden want to do this more circuit style, like you still like the way you build muscle is the way you want to maintain it during fat loss phase. Again, maybe we do something like maybe we alter things slightly in terms of maybe we do a few things that are a little less like shorter rest. Maybe you do maybe a little bit more supersets. Again, I personally don't really do that, but you could potentially do that in a fat loss phase. But the goal is like you still need to train in a way that's going to build muscle, right? So we still need to take the target muscle close to failure. We still need to progressively overload because if we get away from that and we're in an energy deficit, you could potentially lose some muscle in that process, especially depending on what your methods are during fat loss in terms of how quickly you're losing weight, how much protein you're getting, et cetera. We want to make sure that's all in a good spot. So we still want to progressively overload in a fat loss phase from a weight training perspective. I think too many people think that they're going to lose strength right off the bat or their performance is going to suffer. And I think that is overblown and it gets in your head when you go to train. And and you leave a little bit more in the tank than what you should, and it gets in your head more than anything. And I think you'd be surprised that if you recover well and you have a good plan in place from a nutrition perspective, you really shouldn't lose too much performance or strength in a fat loss phase. So again, even if your goal isn't to look like a bodybuilder, you should still train to build muscle in a fat loss phase. So we're still going to keep it the same. Like I said, we may change a few small things. From a cardio perspective, we're still going to do it for the heart health benefits. We may do a little bit more, right? You may do a little bit more overall to help get you into that energy deficit. But again, the big thing is going to be the nutrition, right? That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to change. And yes, that needs to be like our main thing, right? That needs to be where we make the biggest change. And then we can alter training slightly. But again, at the end of the day, we're still going to train in a way to build muscle. I bring this up because I made a post on this recently. If people will say, oh, I'm training for fat loss, right? And I feel like that, to me, that means that you're going to alter how you train and you're going to rely on cardio and exercise to lose fat. When at the end of the day, we still need to make sure we focus on our nutrition. That's going to be the big thing, right? If you are somebody that like thinks that the training is going to be the thing that gets you to lose fat over nutrition, you're going to struggle, right? And there's three main reasons why. One, it's not going to be as effective as nutrition can be. Obviously, we want to make sure we exercise. We want to do cardio. That's going to be important for health. And it may help if you increase your energy expenditure from what you've been typically doing. It may help jumpstart weight loss initially, but over time, we're going to see less and less return on that. One, and a couple other reasons here why it's not as effective as nutrition can be. One, you don't burn as many calories as you think you do during workouts. Even if your watch says so, again, that could be off, and you probably don't actually burn that many calories as well, right? It probably overestimates a little bit. Two, it's easy to overeat calories if you aren't really monitoring what you're having. So again, you can do all this exercise, but then if you don't monitor your food intake, it's going to be easy. Like you're probably going to feel a little bit hungrier, right? So you're going to subconsciously overeat calories when you expend more energy than normal. Again, we need to make sure that we're focused on the fat loss side or the nutrition side of things here. Next week, we have the constrained energy model. So not only do you not burn as many calories as you think from workouts and cardio, but the body is also smart and decreases energy burned elsewhere, right? And this is more pronounced in the process of dropping weight. So what this means is you think you increased calories burned by 500 calories, but really it was 300 or less, right? And again, it decreases calories burned like subconsciously throughout the day there. And lastly, I just feel like this leads to a higher risk of burnout and fatigue. Spending hours pushing yourself for the minimal returns that I just talked about, it's going to be mentally and physically taxing. Again, I think you're just more likely to experience burnout and fatigue. So long story short, when we go into a fat loss phase, our training should pretty much stay the same. Like I said, we may alter some variables slightly, but the main muscle building principles are still going to be there in our weight training. And then from a cardio perspective, again, we're going to keep that baseline and maybe we ramp it up a little bit. Maybe you do a little bit more cardio overall, but we're more so, again, just trying to get those. It can just be a way to potentially make your fat loss phase a little bit more efficient. For some people, adding in a little bit more is just they can't do it from a time commitment standpoint. And for some people, it makes them like extra hungry. Okay, in that case, maybe we don't. Again, it's more so the nutrition. Like we're going to mess with nutrition no matter, but maybe for that person, we're just a little bit more focused on nutrition in general there. Hopefully that answers that. Again, I think the big takeaway is we really shouldn't change training for fat loss. It should still be the same. Even if your goal is to lean out and be smaller, we still want to make sure we train to build muscle. And I guess this is my last point on this. Depending on where you're at, most people think that they can't build any muscle in a deficit. And I just think that ultimately comes down to their methods and how they go about things. And again, part of it comes down to how they train as well too. And so I think you'd be surprised that if you fat loss diet the right way, you weight train to build muscle during fat loss, you use cardio strategically, and you get everything else dialed in, like from a lifestyle perspective, I bet more people than they think have some runway to build muscle. Now, again, you're never going to build as much muscle as you would at maintenance or a surplus, but you could still build a little bit. Again, people think that no matter, like, they automatically aren't going to build any muscle. And I think that just comes down to methods and them thinking they have more muscle than they do and whatnot there. All right. Last question of the day is best split for 4 times training with only one lower day. I don't want to make any generalizations here, but I feel like this is definitely probably going to be more so for my guys, right? I feel like women typically don't want to just train legs once a week, but I could be wrong. There's probably going to be some that, maybe you have really developed legs, you don't like training legs, and you want to develop your upper body, right? So I shouldn't say that's always the case, but generally speaking, most women want to probably train legs at least a couple times a week. And I do think there is some benefit to making sure that you do train like legs, training legs. You are going to get a little bit more energy expenditure out of that. So I think it's a good idea to make sure you hit your legs twice a week, right? But again, maybe you have very well developed legs and you're lean, you state like you're happy with that side of things. Then, hey, training the legs once a week is the way to go here on this. But first, before I go into the best split, just understand there is no best split, right? There are many different ways you can go about it and it be effective. You just need to make sure you're able to recover and you progress your training over time. And I think that's the most important. People look for they try to look for this like perfect split or, oh, hey, what's your training split? What's that training program? And again, there's different methods, whatnot. But again, there's really no magic split. I think you want to get a good baseline. Again, my baseline like splits going to be about 4 days per week, like an upper lower split, essentially, with a little bit of upper body sprinkled in on lower body in most cases. Hit each muscle group 2 times per week. That's a great baseline. And then from there, you can just, if you are someone who's, hey, my legs feel pretty good, they're pretty responsive to training, they're a little bit lower on the priority list. Maybe now we shift to maybe hitting our legs once a week versus twice, right? So I think you should stick with that baseline for at least a year or two and really progress that. And then you can look at changing it up. But again, just understand there's no magic to any specific split. But what I'll typically do with this setup, if you do this 4 times a week, is first would be like a upper push, upper pull. Again, depending on what your priority is, you could switch that around, then off, then a lower body, then an upper, then off, right? That's one way to do it there. So that last upper is going to be a combination of push and pull, but then you have those 2 days there. You could also do upper, lower, right? So you switch the order around, then you're off, then you do an upper push, then you do an upper pull, then off, and then rinse and repeat, right? That's another way you could do that. And then lastly, the way Brian has it set up for me is I do 4 days per week. And if I train quads and hams once a week, so we do split up quads and hams to where day 1 is like pull and then hams. Day 2 is just like more push type movements, then off on Wednesday. Then Thursday is more just pull. And then Friday is push and quads. So that's another way you could potentially set this up. And if you want to split it up, but if you want to do just one, I would do it how I have it set up there in the first 2 with that. So again, programming's interesting. Like I said, I think it's good to start with the baseline and then you can change it around from there based on how you respond there. That's it for this episode. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. Again, I appreciate everybody who listens. Next, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Jeff. It's where I'm most active on social media. And if you have any questions on what I talked about today or just any questions in general, I do a Q&A once a week. And then you can always just reach out via DM if you have any questions. I'm just a DM away there. And then lastly, if you have any specific questions on how you should train during fat loss or how to set up your fat loss phase or how to set up the right split for you, then my free 30-minute strategy calls for you. And we dive into your goals and get you a good game plan moving forward. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. That's it for me. I'll chat with you guys next time.